Thank you for tuning in to episode 2 of Restoring a Dining Room Set. In the first episode, we learned how to take the chair apart and begin the process to remove the stain and the lacquer from the chair itself. Part of that process included sanding with 60, 80, and then 100 grit sandpaper. Now we're going to turn our attention to any repairs that may be needed. There were two areas of the chair that needed repair. One was underneath one of the arms, where the dowel went in, and the second was on the leg. We used an acetone-based wood putty that's color matched to the final color of the chair, and apply it to the area. Gently applying through, only applying what's needed, allowing it to dry, and then taking a broad chisel, remove any excess material that may be there, and then be sure to focus that we don't close up the hole itself where the dowel goes, so clean that up as well. Then come back with some 100 grit sandpaper, sand it smooth, and once done, we'll never be able to see that there was even a repair needed to be made. Now, this area won't be seen because it's under the arm of the chair. A more visible spot was on one of the chair legs, where there was a chip taken out, and we used the same process, the acetone-based putty. That's going to be the color of the final stain of the chair. Apply it, allow it to dry, then take a chisel, smooth off any excess material, excess putty that's there, sand it with 100 grit sandpaper to get it smooth, and ensure it all blends in perfectly across the leg of the chair. With that complete, we can then move on to the next phase, which is going to be doing a dry assembly of the chair. We do the dry assembly to make sure that all of our repairs, as well as all the sanding, get us to a point where we're able to do a final glue up. What I typically try to do is do a dry set for all the chairs and then focus on a glue up. We're now going to move on to the table itself. The legs actually have 2 coats of paint on them, both black and green. So using a stripper, we apply the stripper on, and I'm actually stripping the paint on 2 legs at a time. I'm only showing the video of one, because this stripper that I'm using requires it to sit for 10 or 15 minutes before the paint will actually start to lift off. So I applied it to one, then applied it to the second, then came back and did the detail work of going through the leg of the table, and using various scrapers, remove as much of the paint as physically possible, focusing on one side at a time. Again, even when you do remove it, there's still going to be some residue left on the leg itself, which will require some additional attention. But really, it's about taking your time, going through, applying the stripper, making sure you're wearing the proper protective equipment as well. You notice I'm wearing gloves, because this stripper will burn your hands. But go through, slowly scrape it off. Be careful not to gouge any of the wood. And I use an old paint can to capture any of the scrapings from the paint or lacquer that I peel off of a piece. And again, just focus through a little bit at a time and get as much of the paint off of it as possible. It may be necessary to apply multiple layers of stripper to a product, to the chair itself or to the leg. It doesn't always come off with the first time. So you'll notice what I do is I come back once I get the majority of the paint off, is apply additional stripper, again using the protective gloves, and then use a Scotch-Brite pad. And with that Scotch-Brite pad, I dip it in the stripper and actually sand it down with the Scotch-Brite pad to remove as much as I can. Where necessary, I'll bring a scraper back into the process where it gets a little bit stubborn to remove as much as physically possible from it. The best part about using the Scotch-Brite pad as opposed to sandpaper is, one, you can actually get it wet. And there's multiple grades of Scotch-Brite pads you can use. If you use the dark gray Scotch-Brite pad, it's the equivalent of a 120, 150 grit sandpaper. So by using that, I'm actually going to be saving a step for myself, so that all I'm going to be doing is using the Scotch-Brite to remove the paint, and then come back with a dry Scotch-Brite pad and then sand down the entire piece. This becomes the most important part. You'll notice that both these videos have spent a lot of time focusing on removing the paint and the focus and the detail of the turnings. You have to remove as much of the old material as possible before you can apply a new finish. Really the focus and the perfection becomes in the preparation before you apply any additional finishes. So here I am through the video, sanding down now to 120 grit with the Scotch-Brite pad, and you can see it does a nice job of getting into the turnings themselves. And with 4 lathes complete, they all strip down very nicely. And now we're going to move on to episode 3 of the video, where we're going to be spending our time cleaning up the aprons of the table and then the tabletop. So click, like, subscribe, follow along on this journey.